You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Hey there, folks, and welcome to episode number 146 of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. My name is Kevin O'Shea. I am the host of this funky, cool, awesome, spectacular podcast about all things Japan. And this week we've got another wonderful episode coming your way about Japan stuff, because that's how we roll. That's what we do. We talk about Japan. We talk about jobs in Japan, life in Japan, Japanese culture, language, you name it, food. Oh, we're all over the map. And this week we've got returning guest Andrew Higgins, and he's on to talk about coaching in Japan. That's right, coaching a sports team in Japan. Something I've never done, but it's pretty interesting. And since I've never done it, I can't really talk about it. So what better way to learn about it than bring someone on who has done it? So again, this week we've got Andrew on to talk about coaching right here in Japan.
Please hang up and try again.
Folks, so for about 10 more days after this episode is posted, you can buy yourself a Just Japan podcast t-shirt or coffee mug over at teespring.com. The link is in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com, justjapanstuff.com, where you can go and buy the shirt, or go check out my Twitter at jlandkev, or check out go like the Just Japan podcast Facebook page, Just Japan Stuff. And you can find links to buying a t-shirt or a coffee mug to support the podcast. These are things you can do. Also, of course, you can find the Just Japan podcast over there on Twitter. I'm thinking more where we can download the show. You can find it on Libsyn, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, all over the place. That's right. And again, all those links will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. The spring season is upon us. That's right, that season called spring. It's creeped up on us. It's jumping out at us. The plum blossoms are in bloom. The peach blossoms will be soon, and the cherry blossoms will be soon after that. Hanami, my friends, a wonderful time of year to be in Japan, to enjoy Japan, to explore Japan, to have a good time. I'm really excited that my friend Glenn, and I don't know if you listen to the podcast, Glenn, out there in Canada, we performed in a dinner theater show together, gosh, how many years ago? Almost 20 years ago, together in Prince Edward Island. And he's going to be visiting Japan to see the cherry blossoms very soon, and I hope we have an opportunity to meet up. I'm really excited. March is almost upon us, and I do have a holiday in March, and that will make me very happy to have some downtime to podcast, to blog, to relax, to travel, to explore myself. Not explore myself, I mean explore, as in myself exploring. Yes. So things are going very well here in the Just Japan podcast-averse, and they're going well over on justjapanstuff.com. Guys, if you haven't noticed, I've turned justjapanstuff.com not into just a landing pad for the podcast, but it's becoming quite a hub for Japan-related content. Go over to justjapanstuff.com, go like that page, bookmark it, go over to the sidebar and sign up for the email posts and updates, because there's a lot more content going up there, written content about Japan itself, about life in Japan, traveling to Japan, travel tips, food stuff, you name it, it's going up there. A lot of writing by myself, Kevin, and as well as some different wonderful contributors who are helping add content to justjapanstuff.com. My goal is I'm hoping to build justjapanstuff.com into a really amazing site that has just like literally dozens and hundreds of incredible articles about Japan that people from all around the world can go to and find out and learn about Japan from. So that's a goal, and that's what we're turning that page into. So go to justjapanstuff.com, go love it, like it. Again, it's the home of this podcast, and it's a home of a lot of cool stuff. Japan! All right, guys, so hey, let's jump into the interview portion of the podcast. because you know what? Mr. Andrew Higgins is on tonight, and he's got a lot of cool things to say. It is the interview portion of the Just Japan podcast, episode number 146, and we're going to be talking about coaching sports teams in Japan. We're going to be talking about coaching at schools in Japan, and we're talking with one of the most returning guests of the Just Japan podcast. New word there, guys. Mr. Andrew Higgins. Yay!
Hey, how's it going? Have I beaten out Mully for that title?
Maybe not.
Okay.
But I think you're probably pulling ahead of Kansai PJ for second now.
Nice.
and that's gonna really upset PJ. And fair be it, PJ. You got to get on this podcast more often.
That's right.
Yeah.
Defend your title.
your second place title.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Andrew. Actually, I've no idea. No tally. 146 episodes. It's all confusing at this point. I have no idea what's up, what's down, what's east, what's west. It's a haze, folks.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, no problem.
And it's always good to have Andrew on just to talk about anything. You're one of those guys where it's fun to. I gotta admit, that's I think one of the things that a lot of the people who listen to the podcast who are regulars will always say, that they always love hearing Mully on talking about stuff, because it's just fun to listen to Mully talk about stuff. But I also hear the same feedback about you. People just enjoy hearing you on the podcast, and they enjoy hearing your stories and whatnot.
That's good. That's nice to hear. I'm glad that that somebody is taking something away from these, or finding some kind of enjoyment, or hopefully a little bit of education about Japan or life in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if they weren't, and I didn't get that feedback, I would never call you again.
Exactly.
That's the reason I keep bringing you back. No. So what's really cool, folks, is I wanted Andrew to come on this evening and chat about a topic that I actually have no experience in Japan, which is, everyone, secret. One of the reasons why I call it the Just Japan podcast, when I talk about everything you want to know about Japan, it's because I bring on people who know stuff about Japan that I don't. Because my scope is pretty limited. I know that there are those out there who consider themselves Japan experts. I don't. I've been here for almost 9 years, but again, my scope is pretty limited. I have certain interests and hobbies and a certain type of life and a certain job, and I'm very familiar with that world. But there's a lot of cool stuff that people can do in Japan that I don't experience. And that's why I have different people on. And Andrew's going to talk about coaching.
Yes.
In Japan, something I've never done. Now, coaching is something very interesting. When I think about coaching, obviously, we're talking sports and whatnot. And I recently was, back in the fall, looking at a job search site, and it was for international schools. And they had a section that they wanted applicants to fill out about positions in schools, coaching positions that you would feel confident enough to put yourself down to be a head coach or an assistant coach. And I went through the list, and there was actually nothing of all these different sports that I would feel confident enough about myself to be a head coach, but there were several that I would feel comfortable to be an assistant coach.
Yeah.
So, for example, running, cross-country running was one. I'm currently not a lot of a runner, but I do have a big background in running. So, I feel confident enough to I know about running. I know I could put together plans on paper for students and help them. I think the same went for if there was a boxing club. I used to box when I was in high school. Believe me, don't put me in the ring right now. Oh God, no. But again, I could put on a pair of focus mitts and hold a heavy bag, and probably put some exercise routines together on paper.
Right.
And there's several sports where I feel comfortable that way.
Yeah.
But in Japan, I've never had any opportunity to do any sort of coaching whatsoever. So, Andrew, I suppose, this guy's been on the podcast so many times, folks, that sometimes I forget that some of you, this may be your first episode listening. So before we jump into talking about coaching, Andrew, could you tell the Just Japan podcast listeners, the new ones out there, a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, and where you live in Japan?
Sure. Well, so I moved to Japan in 2012. I came here a couple of times before. The first time was back when I graduated from high school, and then came back again a few years later. Well, 8 years later, 2008. And I was in the Kobe area at that point for a few months. And then 2012, almost 5 years ago, moved here full time to be an English teacher. And I've lived in Ibaraki Prefecture that whole time. I've lived in a couple different towns here in Ibaraki, but yeah, for 5 years I've been here in Ibaraki and teaching English. And it wasn't until actually a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, when I moved, that I started coaching.
Okay, cool. So, by the way, for those who may not be familiar with the geography of Japan so much, where is Ibaraki Prefecture?
So Ibaraki is just north of Tokyo. So
Okay.
if you know where Tokyo is at and you just go straight up north just a little ways, the first prefecture you run into is Ibaraki.
Okay, so obviously people know Tokyo, and
Yeah.
I mean I live in Kobe, and Kobe's it's no metropolis, but it's still a pretty big city. It's 1.5 million people, and by Canadian standards, I am a Canuckistanian. That's pretty damn big. Biggest place I've ever lived. No. Okay. Let's step back. No, it's not. I lived in Seoul. I forgot about
That's
that.
pretty big.
And I lived in Busan. Okay, yeah, Busan's about 4 million. Seoul's about 15. Yeah, okay. But okay, it's the biggest city in Japan I lived in, and the only place I've lived in. But yeah, so how would you describe Ibaraki? Is it a pretty rural kind of place?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's very rural. Like it doesn't take me that long to get to Tokyo. Like my friends and I, we meet up once a month or so. I have friends from different places that live in Tokyo. We all kind of meet up once a month, just to get a burger and just kind of hang out and goof off in Tokyo. And it takes me about an hour and a half by train to get to Tokyo, so it's not so far away that I can't be there for a day trip. But yeah, it takes me the city I live in is city part of the town. Like I don't live out in the country, but it takes me about 20 minutes to drive. I have to drive to school. It takes me about 20 minutes to drive to one of my schools. And so, yeah, it's like a 20-minute drive. So, yeah, like I live in town and I live near the station and there's stuff in town. But yeah, to get anywhere, you have to pretty much drive.
Okay, so you have to have a license where you live.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. Well. Okay. So now, I mean, what I wanted to talk about this evening was about coaching. So, can you tell us? So you're a teacher. Obviously, you've already mentioned that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the school you work at? I suppose, kind of in a nutshell, like what you kind of do there, and then can you tell us about how you got into coaching?
Sure. Well, so 2 years ago I moved. And so the first 3 years that I was here in Japan, I was only doing elementary school. And so there isn't really an opportunity to do or help out with any of the club sports at your school because elementary schools don't really do club sports. That's not really anything until junior high.
Okay, and that's a pretty darn big thing in junior high, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like you have to, you actually have to. I believe it's mandatory in Japan where you have to join a club, right?
Yeah, there's some sort of club activity that you have to be a part of. And so my school, so I moved, and 2 years ago moved to this new school and actually started junior high for the first time.
Okay.
So I was really excited because I had heard from other people that had worked in junior high about, doing club sports. And some were either words of warning of like, don't get involved because once you start, you have to, you're kind of expected to keep helping. And then other people were just like, yeah, no, it's fun. You can kind of show up and, maybe go to some games or whatever. It's a fun experience. So yeah, 2 years ago I started, and honestly, it was just maybe the first couple of days after school, after I was finished with teaching and stuff, all the kids, went off to their clubs, and I took the opportunity to just kind of walk around the school, one, to familiarize myself with the school, because I just gotten there.
Yeah.
But also just to kind of, peek my head in the door and see, oh, okay, here's the art room and they're working on art projects, or here's the music room. And I eventually made my way down the hall and out to the gym, where they were having basketball practice. And we also have volleyball and badminton. So they were all in there together practicing. And I just kind of hung out there for a while. And then around the time that I was supposed to leave, I was like, all right, I'll see you guys later. And they were like, see ya. And I went home. And then the next day, the same thing happened. I kind of made my way through the school, except I went outside and kind of watched the soccer team practice and walked out by the field houses where they keep all the equipment and stuff, and walked around the corner, and all of a sudden I see just softball. I was like, oh, I didn't even know we had a softball team. So kind of hung out at the softball field and watched them practice for a little bit. And actually one of my former students, now she's since graduated and gone to high school, she was really good with English. And so she ran over to me and asked, she's like, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm just, here to check out what's going on. And she's like, do you want to help with practice? And I was like, sure. So it just kind of started from there, and I just kind of kept showing up, and they didn't tell me to stop. So
Okay, now I'm gonna stop right now. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna say stop. Hey, you, Mr. Higgins, stop.
yeah.
And I'm gonna go back, just because for the sake of, for those out there who are listening who are not from America or Canada or maybe from different types of ball throwing countries, can you tell us? Okay, and I'm not trying to talk down to anybody, but I have to admit, like when I talk to friends of mine who are from Europe and stuff, and they talk about handball, I kind of scratch my head and say, boo, not sure what's going on there. Or when, of course, friends of mine from down under talk about cricket, I scratch my head and I say, I love those bugs. They make beautiful sounds. We have different sorts. So what's basically the kind of the difference between, say, softball and baseball?
Well, so there are some actual rule differences, and depending on, so the team we have a baseball team at our school, and we also have a softball team, and the softball team is an all-girls team, and so usually, now this might be different for men's softball. I believe it's different for men's softball.
But it tends to be in Japan, I know, like in the school leagues, it tends to be girls softball, right? Normally.
Right, yeah. So a softball diamond compared to a baseball diamond is smaller. Okay. So it's a shorter distance between where the pitcher is and the catcher is than in regular baseball. The distance between the bases is also different. It's shorter. And, the field itself is just kind of more compact. It's just moved in a few meters. So yeah, that's pretty much.
But also the ball's quite a bit different, and the way they pitch is quite a bit different too, right?
Right. So it's fast pitch underhand, and it's also much bigger than a normal baseball. It's more the size of like a grapefruit, basically.
Yeah, it's like double the size or triple the size.
Yeah. And what was the other thing? Oh, there's no stealing bases.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can actually be called out for stealing bases or being off the base.
Really?
Which I didn't realize. These were things that I kind of picked up as I was coaching, and then also educating myself later on because, I was like, okay, if I'm going to be around this, I've got to be able to, know what's right and
be
what's
a student of the sport, right?
Right.
Huh, I did not know that. I mean, I played baseball. I played competitive ball from the time I was 4 years old or 5 years old up until the end of junior high school. Like, that's baseball.
Yeah.
And softball, we had a men's league where I grew up, and we really had a lot of respect for those guys, man, because it was just amazing how fast they could throw a pitch.
Oh yeah,
it was just like when you like an adult, a fit adult. Oh my God, who's like an experienced pitcher, like mind bending.
Yeah.
How they can, and I think we actually even called it, where I was from in Eastern Canada, we called it whip. I don't know why. It was like the nickname for it, like softball. They're like, whip. They play a whip. I think it had to do with like the way they threw it. The pitcher would throw it. It was kind of like a whipping motion.
Yeah.
But
that's pretty cool. Yeah, so you can get called out even if you're like leading off. Like there's no leading off either. Like you can get called out for leading off.
Oh really? Okay. You're so foot's on the base.
Yeah. You were on the base. Like
you're planted.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Now once the ball's hit, obviously you can feel free to move around the base as much as you want.
Hopefully, or...
That's highly encouraged, especially from the coaches yelling from the sideline.
Run, run! Don't stand there.
Yeah.
Oh wow. So okay, so you obviously, by the sounds of it, we already have this impression. Before you became a coach, you weren't really that familiar with the game itself.
No, not at all. I mean, my my university had like intramural softball that I played.
Yeah.
But it was almost borderline just a pickup game. It was so relaxed, and
But
people were just kind of.
would that have been, if I'm assuming, if it's in America, like intramural softball, like when we talk about softball in Canada, if it's like something like that in intramural sports in school, we're talking like slow pitch.
Yeah, it's usually
like underarm. Like we used to jokingly call it slob ball.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because it was more about drinking beer than actually doing anything else.
It was just like, and it was all between like other students. So it was just students, made their own teams and played. Like, I mean, my school had a baseball team. They had basketball. They had, other actual sports. But not that softball is not a real sport, but they had, division, NCAA division games and stuff like that. But intramural softball was just for us, that just wanted to goof off and, play some softball.
Yeah, and I mean, in actual softball, like you're talking about, you coach, it's a very serious sport in Japan. And I mean, I mean, the Japanese women team won the gold medal in the London Olympics.
Right.
And I know the softball was removed from the Olympics in Brazil, but I think I've read it's going to be back in the Olympics again.
Yeah, I believe so.
And the next one, which will be in, I don't know, where is it? Tokyo!
Yeah, 2020.
Should have known that one.
Yeah.
Everyone, so I now hand in my Just Japan podcast card. My Just Japan podcast license.
This is the last episode.
This is the last episode. I thought I just asked where the next Olympics would be. So now I turn in my podcasting license and I hand it over to Andrew. Here, the keys to the car. No.
Well, this is not going to turn out well.
Episode 147 is up to you. Okay. And all those from now on. Okay, no, we won't do that. But I've heard it's back in the Olympics for the next one, which would make sense. The fact that Japan won the gold in the last one,
right?
They probably really pushed to get it put in the Tokyo Games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you're coaching. So what as a softball coach, what are your duties? What do you do?
Well, so we have three coaches actually.
Okay.
We have the head coach, and then myself and the other coach. And so it's the way that it goes in Japan is that it's the teachers that are the coaches.
Yeah.
So if you're and now this doesn't really apply if you're just your standard ALT. You're just kind of there to teach English and then you go home.
And by the way, ALT means assistant language teacher, right?
Right. Which is like the majority of what the majority of foreigners that are going to come to Japan to teach is. That's usually going to be either their first role, and maybe they kind of move on to something else. But usually, like their first role is just an ALT. You're there to teach English or help with the teaching of English. And usually, you don't work directly for the school, and it's not really expected or even required of you to help out with anything other than what you're assigned to.
You teach your English class, and off you go.
Right.
And I think most assistant language teachers in Japan, that's pretty much what they do, right?
I think so. I mean, and some of them barely do that, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah. Yes. That is so true. But you are bucking the trend.
Yeah, I am.
And you decided to, and like you mentioned, so for all you guys out there listening, I don't know much about teaching English in Japan, like working in a position like Andrew, but I did spend almost a year as a direct hire ALT for the city of Osaka. And unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to be involved in something like this because of whatever kind of legalities. I think it had to do with liability and insurance. We were told that we weren't allowed to, because I know like when our program started, there was a whole bunch of people who were like really ganky and eager and like, I want to be a coach. I've got a background in sports. Can I help out?
Yeah.
And they were just like, nope, no, you cannot do that. You can't do that. You can't assist. We don't want you getting hurt out there. You're just going to teach and that's it. And we were more than just discouraged. We were clearly told you can't be coaches.
Yeah.
In that situation that I was in at the time.
Yeah, and with the public school teachers, if you're teaching, math or science or whatever it is, and you're the Japanese teacher working at school, you also have the responsibility of then coaching afterwards, after class. So a lot of the teachers, they'll have their normal class schedule and then have to go teach or go coach. So, some of the other English teachers, like the teachers that actually work for the school, they're the tennis coach, or, the science teacher is also one of the, softball coaches, so they have to take on that role as well.
And it's a big responsibility, right? That's a lot of
Oh
work
yeah,
for them.
it is, because
It's almost like another full-time job on top of their full-time job.
Yeah, definitely, because so practice usually goes until, well, winter practice actually ends early because it just gets so dark out that you can't see. But practice usually ends around 5, so we can get all of the kids out of the school area by 5:15. That's kind of like the goal, is to end all of the clubs by 5 so everybody can get out the door by 5:15. But usually in the summer it'll go until, I don't know, 6:30, 7 o'clock, because it just stays, daylight so long. And then after that, then you've got Saturdays and Sundays where you've got practice and games.
And the holidays too.
Yeah, they definitely practice. They have practice more times than I actually show up to practice.
Oh, it's insane. Like, like now, I mean, I live, just like a block away from where I live is the local junior high school, just in my neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And I went out for a run on the 23rd of December, which is the Emperor's birthday, which is a national holiday. And the soccer team and the baseball team were out practicing.
Yep.
I'm like, what? Are you serious? It's the Emperor's birthday. It's not just a national holiday. It's like the biggest national holiday in Japan.
Yeah.
And the soccer team and the baseball team were out practicing, and the teachers are there, like the Japanese teachers.
Yeah.
Coaching. It was just like business as usual.
Yep.
And it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's honestly a big investment of your time if it's something that you're going to do, especially if you're an ALT, because you're not required to do any of this, and you're more than likely not paid to do any of this either. So it's, it can be a big sacrifice to your time, and especially if you're going to do stuff on the weekends. If you're going to have games, if you're going to go to the games, if you're going to go to the practices on the weekends, like that's all your time. So, and
it's interesting. It's funny, like when you think about it. Like right now, if I'm to say, like, so you're telling me you use, I mean, your free time. You're not getting paid, and you're coaching your team, your school's team. Yeah. And you make that, air quote sacrifice, but obviously it's something that you choose to do, right?
Yeah.
And when I think about it, when I was a kid in Canada, I played Little League, and all those coaches, they weren't getting paid. Yeah. They were all volunteers too, right? They were community volunteers. Yep. And they were just doing it because they wanted to help kids in the community. Yeah. And they were giving a lot of their time to do that, right? Yeah. So everyone, number one, hats off to Mr. Andrew Higgins. So I'm curious, like, what motivates you to do it, to continue doing it after a few years of being a coach?
I found that with teaching, like in the classroom, a lot of times students can be very either standoffish with teachers, or there's that fear of they want to ask a question, they don't want to look embarrassed, or they don't want to answer the wrong question or the question the wrong way. And I feel like there's an opportunity outside of the classroom, and it's not necessarily through coaching. It can just be interactions outside of the class. Interacting with students on a level with them outside of class, whether it's talking about, what music they like to listen to, or what movies they watch, or what anime they're watching, or what manga they're into outside of class. Then once you get back into the classroom, um, there's less of a barrier there. I've seen students that were, just had no interest in learning English whatsoever, had no interest in even really sitting down and paying attention in a class. I had one student in particular who would just get up and walk out of class. Like, just, I'm done here. I don't need to learn this. This is boring. And he would just leave. So I kind of started talking to him a little bit after class, trying to figure out like what his deal was. Like, what are you into? And he was on the soccer team. I was like, all right, that's cool. Soccer's pretty cool. Like, just talking about soccer. Like, let's talk about soccer.
Yeah.
Like, let's just talk. Like, I couldn't tell you the first thing about soccer. I know, like, I know some of the rules, but like, I don't know players. I don't know teams. I don't know anything. But it was something that he was interested in. So I talked to him about it. And over the weeks, as the weeks passed, I noticed that he was actually staying in class, not just making an excuse to go to the bathroom for the 5th time, and started paying attention in class more. And for me, like, and I notice with my students, the girls that are on the softball team, I use Japanese with them, because it's, we're out on the softball field. I don't feel like I have to be like 100% English, but a lot of times they ask me questions. Just random questions like, what does this mean in English? Or how do you say this? Or, if I say something, swing the bat straight, stuff like that. I'll use English and try to like teach them random things that way. And then they end up running around the softball field saying stuff in English. And then when class time comes and I'm walking around the room while the Japanese teacher's teaching, they can pull me aside and ask me a question about something that's going on in the lesson. Whereas before, they might not have done that because I'm just like the scary ALT that stands up at the front of the classroom and, walks around and makes sure you're not asleep and you're paying attention, like that's totally not who I am anyways. But like, students that don't know you outside of the classroom don't know you.
They don't know you. Yeah. So it's all about trust and building relationships, right?
Yeah.
No, it's pretty awesome. I completely get what you mean. I mean, I don't have the depth of it like you, like the things you have done, but I think back to my brief period as an ALT. Or in the school I was an ALT at the junior high school in Osaka. I was the first ALT they'd had in like 5 or 6 years. So the whole group of kids, the 3 years there, they'd never had an ALT. And I just remember it was a rough school, man. It was a rough school. There's an area in Osaka called Juso. And it was near Juso, a place called Tsukamoto, which is very working class and, tough kids.
Yeah.
I just remember I had this moment with the Ninensei kids, so basically the 8th graders who were often the most horrible.
Oh my gosh.
The worst ever. And I think for any of you out there who are teachers in America or Canada, you're going to agree. Like the 8th grade is like the worst.
I don't know what happens to them.
It's called adolescence, man.
Because the first year students are just scared. Because like this is their first year in junior high. Mm-hmm. There's all these new rules. Like they're afraid that they're going to mess up something or do something wrong. So like the most of them are just scared for the first year.
Yeah.
And then when they hit second year, they're not afraid of anything. And then they just don't care about anything.
Yeah. And then in 3rd grade, they're like, oh my God, I got to go to high school and I got to write a test for that.
Right.
I got to buckle down.
Yeah.
Maybe term 1 they're punks, but by term 2 they're like, uh-oh. But yeah, there was a kid in one of the classes in the 4th kumi. I remember Ninensei Yonkumi, and he was like the boss of the class, and it's very kind of like Yakuza style. Like he was the boss, and he was like a tough kid, man. You could just tell by looking at him. And he had like spiky bleached hair. And then I found out that he went to an MMA gym like 5 or 6 days a week, and he did MMA. And there was just one day I remember I walked by his desk and I looked down, and he had like a magazine he was trying to hide under like a book, and it was an MMA magazine, and there was a picture of Conor McGregor, who is like the amazing Irish fighter of doom. in
Right.
MMA, and I was just like, and I just looked at him. I was like, Conor McGregor, and his eyes almost popped out of his head and fell on the desk.
Yeah.
He was like, "What?" He looked at me like, "You know who this is?" I'm
Yeah.
like, "Of course I know who that is. I mean, I love MMA." I said, "I watch MMA all the time." I said, "When I was in high school, I was in the boxing club. I boxed for a few years in school, and then I used to do taekwondo." And he was just like, "Oh my god!" And all of a sudden, this kid who was, believe me, like, I mean, he was like the tough of the class who trained in MMA. Academics was not a thing.
Right.
Instantly connection. And then that just, it went through the school. I got to admit, like, it was a pretty rough school to work in. And within a few days, like, it was amazing. Like, so they called me, at that school, they called me Kevin Sensei. But that class, it was incredible. Every class called me Kevin Sensei. And when I had told them my background, how I had worked at an international school, and in international schools, they would call me Mr. O'Shea, my family name. And I remember, like, a couple of days after that, I went my first class back with that class. I walked in the room, and the Japanese English teacher said, "You're going to like this." And that boy stood up and he said something to the class, and the whole class stood up and they all went, "Good morning, Mr. O'Shea."
Nice.
He made them, the whole class, say, "Good morning, Mr. O'Shea." And for that time on, for the rest of the year, whenever I went to that one class, the whole class would stand up and greet me as, "Good morning, Mr. O'Shea."
That's awesome.
It was really cool. But I made that connection.
Yeah, and that's and like
Accidentally.
yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like, if you're gonna come to Japan, pro tip: if you're gonna come to Japan and be a teacher, you don't have to coach. You don't have to, like, it's not a requirement. But I've had people ask me before, like, how do you reach your students, basically, or I've been in situations where, but we have an interactive forum here in Ibaraki, which is basically just like an English contest, and it's all for junior high students. And I was there coaching my students, and some other students from town were there. I'd never met them before, but they were all just kind of standing around me talking to me, and I was like, all right, cool. All right, good luck, guys. See you later. And went and sat down with some of the other teachers. And one of the teachers from here in town was just like, "Do you know those students?" I was like, "No." He's like, "How do you know?" Like, they knew, like, acted like they knew you and they were friends with you. I was like, "Yeah, I just wasn't sitting over here not paying attention to them." Like, I walked over there and introduced myself and said, "Hey, good luck."
Yeah.
And like that, sometimes that's all it takes. But if you're going to come to Japan and be a teacher, there's ways to, like, reach your students outside of class. Something that I do pretty much every day is when the last bell rings for the end of school and all the students start walking home, I always position myself outside the teacher's office and just stand there, stand up against the wall, just stand there as the kids come down the stairs to go get their shoes to leave for the day, and just say goodbye to kids. Like,
it's really just interesting. Like, kind of what you're saying is, like, obviously, James from the ALT Insider podcast, and James always talks about that. He's like, "Get out of the teacher's room. Get out of the teacher's room.
Yeah,
Don't stay in the teacher's room.
It's so boring in there. Like, unless it's wintertime and it's really cold.
Yeah. or summer and it's so hot outside of the teacher's room.
It's so boring. There's nothing to do in there anyways. Like, I mean, unless there's legitimate things that you have to be doing. Like, sometimes I have to
usually
be making
there's
copies,
not, though.
But usually there's not. And it doesn't, like, take any time out of my day to just go stand out by the exit and say goodbye to kids. And, I've had students over these past 2 years that have either not really talked to me, not like, "Oh man, that student didn't talk to me, that hurt my feelings," but just like students that just, I'm too cool for you, basically. And like, I've seen students just by me standing there, just, giving high fives and saying goodbye to other students. And I have, like, certain students that I have, like, special handshakes with, that this one kid who's kind of reminds me of your student, from your story.
Yeah.
Kind of the Yankee kid, like, just kind of, but he's a really good kid, but he's just kind of crazy sometimes. But, like, every time he sees me, we do this, like, special handshake that him and I do. And, like, that means something to him. And, like, that doesn't take any time, that didn't take any effort from me at all, but it means something to him. And so I'll do it every time just because it just means something to him.
You know,
So
then I think those are just that's just a teacher tip in general. It doesn't matter if you're teaching English or being a teacher,
yeah,
a homeroom teacher in the world. Like, it's all about building relationships, right? Like, I teach at an international school, and I'm at an elementary school, and it's not that big. We're pushing 200 kids, but my goal is to, like, each year make sure that I know the name of every kid in that school,
yeah.
and to at least, and it's not easy, every year, because then there's a whole bunch of kids coming up every April, but to know those names and to just at
Yep.
least, I just love to stand at the top of the stairs and just, like, high five kids.
Yeah.
I'm like, high five, guys, high five, and they just, man, they love it.
Yep. And I have kids that we have like inside jokes. They'll walk past me and they'll like kind of whisper something under their breath, and we'll both laugh about it. I've got students that, I know that are interested in certain video games. I can't tell you over the years how much like terrible music I've listened to just because a student says they're interested in something, and I go, let me go home and check this out and see what this is, so I can talk with them about it like the next day. I've listened to a lot of terrible pop music.
That's, I mean, terrible pop music is a great in.
Yeah.
I found that, like, just listening to, like, you may not be into sports, you're not into MMA or softball or whatever it might be, or soccer, but just being, into music or into dance, that kind of thing. Those are great ways of connecting with the kids, right?
Yeah, and it's really easy. Like, students have, like, they all have notebooks and they all have pencil cases, and they're usually decorated with whatever they're into. So it's really easy to just walk around class and go, oh, that kid is really into this band or this sport or this team or fill in the blank, whatever it is, because they usually personalize the things that they carry around with them at school.
Here, that tip, guys. That's a pro tip.
Pro tip. You just got to walk around and look at what they have written all over their notebooks, because it's usually...
I think some people don't do that, though.
Yeah. It's usually just, whatever band or whatever they're into. So...
Very cool, very cool. And then you can learn that way. I mean, there's...
Yeah.
Even like crotchety old Mr. O'Shea, me, Kevin. I'm middle-aged, everybody. It's not a secret. I am middle-aged, and I got to admit, by listening to pop music,
yeah,
I'm not gonna make myself say, but it makes me feel young. No, but at the end of the day, I mean, when I just listen to the stuff that the kids are into, man, it makes them happy.
Yeah, and I can say, oh yeah, I like this song, or I know who you're talking about when you mention this artist.
Yeah.
It just means a lot, and even elementary students, the same happens with them too. So
yep, absolutely.
It's not just a junior high thing.
Cool, man. Well, I'm curious. Like, so you're coaching your team. Do you, with the softball team at your school, do you go to games on the weekends? Do you participate in things outside of the regular school week with the team?
So my first year there, I did. This year, I have not. Just for the previous mentioned, I'm not getting paid for it. Unfortunately, it does come down to that. Like, I hate that it does come down to that. But like, it was getting to the point where I was going to school Monday through Friday and then showing up Saturday morning at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Much earlier than what I normally do, and then being there till the afternoon.
Okay.
And like, it was, not that I have this important social life or this like important, like, I've got to have all this free time for all this stuff that I do, because I really don't do anything. But honestly, it was just more of like I don't have any like me time.
Yeah.
I'm always at school. I'm always doing something at school, and I wasn't doing anything outside of school.
Completely makes sense. Yeah.
So like, unfortunately, like, I would love to be at more stuff. But yeah, it just got to the point where I was like, I need to kind of limit
Well,
kind of
part-time coaching is better.
yeah, and like me being there till 5 or 6 at night is not a problem. It's not.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah, it's kind of weird to say after that whole like got to get to know your students, but if I'm not getting paid for it, but yeah,
No, I totally get it. I totally get it. I mean, like we all have lives. We have things we want to do. We have lives outside of school and this and that. And I understand how, like, for example, like when you're the Japanese teacher at a school, the full-time Japanese teacher working for that board of education. I mean, being a coach is actually part of the job responsibility, and it's something that you're paid for. You're compensated for. So
right.
if you're working as an ALT, that's something that's 100% volunteer. And I mean, you're volunteering during the week. If you're staying to 5:30, you're actually staying at school probably more than an hour at least than you
Yeah.
have to. Every day you're giving up that time, which is great, and the kids appreciate that. But obviously, on the weekends, man's got to do what a man's got to do. You're an international man of mystery,
Exactly.
an intrigue, and that intrigue and mystery has to be maintained.
Exactly.
But I totally get it. I totally get it. There's a lot of things I would love to do too.
Yeah.
But I just don't have the time. Okay, so hey, Andrew, I don't want to keep you much longer. It's Friday night. We're chatting. We're talking.
Yeah,
And
I got big plans.
you're an internet,
Right.
as do I. Mostly involving going to bed. So you were, as an international man of mystery and intrigue, you have a
Yes.
YouTube channel,
I do.
which all international men of mystery have.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, and the Just Japan podcast listeners, especially the noobs out there, a little bit about your YouTube channel?
Sure. Well, I started my channel, oh gosh, back in college, back before I went to, no, back around in college, just for goofing off. And then once I moved to Japan full time, I kind of wanted to basically just show videos of my life, just so people back home knew, like, hey, he's still alive,
Okay.
just to give people a glimpse of kind of the things that I see on a daily basis. And kind of over the years, I've kind of built that into like just kind of doing weekly videos. It depends on the time of the year if I get real busy. But yeah, the whole goal of my channel has always been to just help people see like a different side of Japan instead of just the glamour and the flash and the things that you see in Tokyo.
Or the life of Kevin, the glamour that is my life. Yes.
Yeah. And just kind of like the everyday normal things that go on in Japan. And I just talk about pretty much what goes on during the week of my week at school, what it's like to be a teacher here in Japan. And it's mostly just for the people that like family and friends back home, but like it's grown, and
yeah, you have more than just family and friends watching you.
Yeah, and now there's people that I talk to from all over the world that send me messages that want to come to Japan and want to be English teachers, and so now I kind of feel responsible to like do quality videos or do better content of just like here's some things to help you out, because that's the things that I found helpful before I moved to Japan, were people's videos that were talking about their life in Japan. It was great because then I could kind of say, okay, this is what I can kind of expect when I move to Japan.
Exactly. And you guys, and I say this in my old man voice waving my cane, you guys are lucky, because when I first came to Asia, there was no such thing as a YouTube.
Yeah.
When I moved to Korea in 2002, man, there ain't nothing like this.
Yeah, well, even back before, like before I moved here in 2012,
you had Busan Kevin and a few others.
Yeah, there were not a lot of people doing videos.
But damn, Busan Kevin was good, huh? Huh?
Exactly.
Whoever that Busan Kevin guy was, huh?
Wherever he went,
wherever he went, he's not making videos anymore. But heard he got a podcast.
Huh, have to check that out sometime.
Not paying the rent, but that's where he is.
But yeah, there were not a whole lot of YouTubers, 5 years ago even, that were in Japan. Yeah. So it was hard to kind of find the people that were like not naming any names, of course, but just like the glitz and glamour of like this is crazy Tokyo versus like this is the everyday life.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a nice
Welcome to the poop, guys.
right. It seems like now there's a nice
Yeah.
divide. At least there's a good. I feel like now there's a good balance of both.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You've got the glamorous side of like, you know, I'm an Akihabara. No,
right?
More like,
because
I'm in a fancy place and this is a fancy thing. But then you also have the people who are like, hey, this is like I'm living in this like little village and welcome to life in Japan.
Yep.
And there's some people who are doing that who've got like incredible. Now here's the difference between 2012, 2010, and now is that people just social media is such a thing and it's such a common thing to use video editors and cameras that people got some mad skills, man.
Oh yeah. Oh my
people
gosh.
Are just it's just like it's just amazing quality of video
just
blogs.
I'm gonna name drop somebody here.
Go for it.
She's got like 35,000 subscribers. The nicest person in the world. Internationally me. Guys, go check out her channel.
Yeah. Actually, I discovered her
videos,
recently through you.
Oh my gosh. Her videos and the editing is like, I watch it and I'm like, I just need to shut my channel down because I will not.
It's like pro quality, right?
Yeah. And like, also nicest person in the world. But like, yeah, her videos just, I watch them and I'm just like amazed like every time because it's just, the editing is just amazing. Yeah.
Everyone's like the next Casey Neistat, right?
Yeah. And
like,
I mean,
I think a lot of people are learning from that kind of style and just kind of going with that kind of amazing kind of editing and
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's Kevin. YouTube, no happen now. No happen. Me one take video. Shoot.
That's pretty much what I'm at. I'm
yeah,
just like, you know what? I'll get it in one shot. If not,
yeah, if not, warts and all, farts and all, burps and all. Yep. Guys, this weekend, if you want to see me, this is it. I can't do that. But yeah, okay, cool. So how can people find you online, good sir?
Well, you can either do a search on YouTube for Higgins in Japan, or you can go to facebook.com/Higgins in Japan. And there's links there to all my videos. I always post my videos on YouTube and then always through the Facebook page. And you can find all the other social media, Twitter and Instagram and whatever else I'm on. So
cool.
Yep.
All right, guys, go there. Higgins in Japan. All the links will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. Go there, find the show notes. All those linkies will be there. So you got to do that. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to stop by the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on again.
Yay. Always a pleasure.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
All right, folks, that does it for another episode of the Just Japan podcast. Thank you so much, Mr. Andrew Higgins, for taking the time to stop by the podcast again. Go over to YouTube, Higgins in Japan. Go like it. Follow that man online. He's a cool guy. He's fun. He's interesting. You know that. You just heard him talk. He's cool stuff. All the links to Andrew will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. Go check it out under episode number 146. Remember, you can support the Just Japan podcast by going over to Teespring and buying a t-shirt with the new logo, the new Just Japan podcast logo. Get yourself a coffee mug with the logo on it. The links will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. Of course, you can find us on all of those major podcatchers, Libsyn, SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher. We're all over the place, folks. You can contact me at any point in time by sending me an email at justjapanpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at JLandKev, on Instagram at JLandKev, on YouTube at BusanKevin, even though I'm not very active on YouTube. And of course, you can find us on the Facebooks. Go to facebook.com/JustJapanStuff. Go like the page, folks. Again, I'm busy as heck. It's spring. I'm almost on holiday, but I'm spending so much time writing content for JustJapanStuff.com, writing new articles. Been writing stuff there about, cultural things you shouldn't do when you come to Japan, different travel tips, more food stuff will go up there. Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome stuff. Cool. All right, guys. Well, that does it for this week's episode of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. Yeah, we'll be back real soon. The Just Japan News podcast will be dropping shortly after this one. And then next week, we'll be back with some really cool stuff about Japan. Hey, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. And I'll be talking to you real soon.
What?